Welcome to another episode of Figgie and the Moose. However, and of which, if you haven't noticed, if it hasn't hit you by now, Moose is not with me today. But I was able to call, or as we say in the entertainment industry, phone a friend. And Jake Brown at Jake Brown Live Radio, or Jake Brown Radio used to be, now it's at Jake Brown Live, host of the Mets Daily podcast on YouTube, is filling in admirably. Former co-host of mine with the Amazing But True podcast. Back in the days, feels like so long ago. Welcome, Jake. What's up?
Yeah, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Phone a Friend was my favorite because you never knew who the guest was actually going to phone. It could have been a grandma. It could have been a nerd friend that knew all these random things. They always called someone random. I was always waiting for them not to answer. Like, why was the person always available? Thanks for having me on. Me and Figgy do have the dad bod in common. But
whoa.
He has a little bit more hair than me, I'll say that.
Hair has nothing to do with the dad bod. I don't think our dad bods are on the same level, but hey, I can always hope to be like you more every day. That makes it easier on my life. Let's talk about, first off, of course, the New York Mets weekend series. Before we get into all the action that was, they avoid the sweep, of course, by beating Cincinnati Reds yesterday 3-2. An exciting finish. We got to, of course, start with the legendary Mr. David Wright being enshrined, having his number retired up in the rafters with the Mets greats. And, honestly, shout out to Steve and Alex Cohen for doing this. It's far too long. It's been watching guys that you will never, ever hear again wearing those numbers, those iconic numbers. And I'm glad David Wright's number was never even a thought to give it out to somebody else after he retired or he went down. And, since his injury-plagued finale of his career with the Mets, you were there. You were in the building. I definitely want to get your thoughts of the ceremony and what you thought of the speech and, of course, the atmosphere. You're always the pulse for the New York Mets.
Yeah, you texted me, were you at Right Day? I say, did the rabbi lead the bar mitzvah? Of course I was there. I could have been living in Wyoming, let alone southern suburban New Jersey, and I was there. And, yeah, it was glorious. I was kind of – Terry walked by me at one point. David Stearns walked by me at one point. We met eyes, and I think he knew that I'm watching his every move right now until July 31st, which we'll talk about in a bit. But it was special. And I do think, how he mentioned it, how it wasn't rain falling. It was tears. And, I was shedding a few tears just from the montage video before he got out there when he touched third and he's looking at former teammates and friends. And, it showed you who he was, who was out there. Super Joe McEwing, Michael Kadire. We're not talking about like Keith and Ron out there and Gary Cohen. We're talking about some obscure guys. And that's what we love about this franchise. We're those obscure guys. I love Super Joe McEwing. Obviously we love Reyes. Reyes had the top hat looking fancy. Jose Stutton wearing his 12 chains, putting me to shame in my chain game. So, he was styling and profiling out there. But seeing those obscure guys is what gets me in my field. Seeing, I met Super Joe McEwing at like a Toyota dealership, I think, where my mom met Howie Rose in the 80s when I was a kid. So,
if you don't know, you can go back and check those old podcasts to hear that episode.
Yes. My mom met Howie Rose in 83. He called her too late, and he met what would be my father, and I'm Jake Brown instead of Jake Rose. Anyways, it was special, and I agree. Number 5 should never be wore again, and first ballot Hall of Famer. If this guy does not get hurt, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, and it's unfortunate what those injuries took away because, he holds all these Mets records, yet could have played 7 more years if he was healthy. I mean, he retired at like 32, so – the place was great, awesome. Now, listen, I do think it took away that the video came out about Lindor and he didn't get named captain. I don't think it took away from David Wright or anything, but I was like expecting it. Like we all had a camera on Lindor in the dugout waiting for him to pop out, seeing if there was a C on his jersey. I thought it was the perfect day to do it. I get they didn't want to take it away from Wright. Maybe do it Sunday on his bobblehead day, give out a bobblehead and then name Lindor the captain. I thought it would have been a good time, but otherwise, incredible day. And, I was waiting for it for a while. Wright passed the baton, or Piazza passed that baton seamlessly to Wright as kind of the face of the franchise. After Piazza was gone in 2002, 2003, Wright arrived in 2004, debuted on this day, by the way, July 21st, 2004, while I was counting my Mordecai money from my bar mitzvah, David Wright stepped on the field, and it was a heck of a run.
Yeah, when you talk about iconic and franchise changing kind of players, right? You talk about Wright and Reyes, and when those two came up, and Wright talked about it. When they were down in the minor leagues, they were told, "Hey, you guys are going to be the left side of the infield for the next 10 years." And what that did was made them better. Iron sharpens iron. They every day tried to make each other better, find a way to read each other without even having to talk to each other. They could look over and by body language know where each one was playing. And that made it a feeling as a pitcher. I know for myself, having experienced it, I throw a slider and it's going to get hit to the left side. I know it's got a real good chance of being an out. The range was spectacular. The ability was, it was going to be a highlight reel play, but that was routine for them. It wasn't like, oh my God, I can't wait to watch that later. It was like, okay, we still got 7 more innings to play in this game and they're going to do it again. Let me give them another opportunity, another play, and just throw strikes. David Wright was, as the captain and just as a player, was everything, man. Like he was, if you could mold a kid and have it be a storybook, and write it for everybody else to see, it's the story of David Wright. Grew up loving the Mets. They were in his backyard in AAA in Norfolk, Virginia. He gets drafted by the Mets. He winds up coming up with the Mets. Spent his whole entire career with the Mets. And, as it's always, said comically, if there wasn't already a Mr. Met, it'd be David Wright. That was it. He was just iconic, the way his smile, his enthusiasm, but the hard-nosed player. He had everything from every generation, the hard edge of the 86 team. He would run hard, slide hard, get dirty, his uniform full of, like a little kid. And he played the game with such an enthusiasm and passion that it was, evident to the fans and everyone around him. And he talked about being the adopted son of New York. And he just felt that he could walk the streets. And that was something that a lot of players, that you have a bad game, you're having a bad series, whatever, you hide. You're not going out. You're ordering Uber Eats in. That wasn't the era that David Wright played in. David Wright's like, I got to go downstairs and eat. I got to go get coffee. And everybody would come up to him and, words of encouragement, and then they knew, hey, it's not going well for you right now, but you know what? You'll get to where you need to go. This team went wherever David Wright was able to take them. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to get them a World Series ring. They got to the World Series. He hits a thunderous home run. Remember when he came back from the back injury in Philadelphia, he hits a thunderous home run. Remember when in Cincinnati to clinch, he hits the home run. Like, it was always storybook moments surrounded by David Wright. And I think that's where it was inevitable. And to me, it was almost his humility and how humble he is by saying he's not deserving, out of his mind. I mean, come on, guy. It's 10 categories you're leading in the record books. And again, that's with the 7 years that you could have had added on to that. For me, the other thing about him is, you talk about the family man. When he walked away from the game, that retirement game, the last hurrah, where not a lot of people know when it's going to end. A lot of times you get that taken away from you. DJ LeMahieu is a prime example, right? He 2 silver sluggers. He's injury play. He's going to try and make a comeback. He was still batting in the 260s, 270s almost, and they pulled the rug out from under him. They felt like there was a time to go to a different direction. That wasn't where the Mets were. They were giving David time to do whatever he needed to do, even if he was going to be a not even a platoon player, but a once-a-week player. It was still David Wright. And he was like, that's not fair to anybody else. And it taking too much of my time, my energy, my effort, and it hurts too bad to keep playing at a high level like this and bouncing back. So when he did the retirement game, Reyes, of course, started at shortstop next to him. His daughter throws out the first pitch. And he wasn't going to be able to share in the moments that, for his daughter to watch him and remember these things. She was so young, and she throws out that first pitch. And I remember I was like, that choked me up more than anything I've ever seen, because you don't get to write your own exit interview. You sit back and you hope for the best, and you wonder if this is going to be it for me. But for him, he was able to walk out on his own terms, and he looks happy, man. He looks happy. He doesn't look like a guy with a lot of regret. The ring eluded him, but undoubtedly he gave everything he had every single day to this organization. And, I think it was a fantastic ceremony, and to see his number now up there forever and ever. Yes, he does belong. And a guy that special, especially with the video that got leaked, that wasn't, I didn't see anything in the video that was going to be mind blowing. Like, oh my God, it was all old video. It was all this should happen kind of thing. But I don't think that was a real video as far as this is what's the script for David Wright Day, to take it away, the attention from him and put it onto Lindor now. That's inevitable. I think Lindor is going to be the captain, and it's in due time. I think even now you kind of just lay in the wake of it for a little bit and then see when's the right time to do it, even if it's towards maybe a playoff push, something of that nature. But I don't think you needed it to happen like a passing of the actual torch, passing of the baton. Lindor fits that mold, but David Wright was a very, very special player who anybody who watched him will tell you it was one of the best players you've ever seen.
And one of the cool things about Wright is this is a franchise surrounded by controversy, past ownership. Some of the guys that are up in those rafters, Doc and Darryl. I mean, those are guys that are controversial figures. When we talk about who the next name is, and people mention Jose Reyes, listen, in some ways, with what happened with Jose Reyes off the field, controversial figure. There are people who do not support Jose Reyes. Yeah. You're a loser if you don't support David Wright. You're a big fat loser.
There isn't a reason. There isn't a reason.
And listen, and I think what adds to him is that he wasn't perfect because he did prank guys, he did make fun of guys, but guys loved him for that. And that's part of the game, and that's why me and you get along, because we roast each other. Because that's you're used to that in the big leagues, guys roasting you.
It's New York.
Slim Jim, you're too skinny. Now you packed on a few pounds. You don't look like the Nelson Figueroa of 2000 that was traded in a Bernard Gilkey trade, because I know that because my friend sent me a picture of you and Bernard Gilkey traded the D-backs. It was on an old ESPN thing, and I was like, wow, that was actually a bad trade for the Mets then, or when we went to Arizona, like it was you and Gilkey. I was like, hey, Arizona got a good end of that deal. Anyways, that's for another podcast. That's for another show. But yeah, there wasn't controversy that surrounds him. And when you think about who's next, even when we think about Carlos Beltran, a guy that was a manager that never managed a game and was fired because of the cheating scandal with the Astros. So this is one, not even Piazza. Like, not everyone loves Piazza. Sir, I won't go into that, but not everyone loves Mike Piazza. Everyone loves David Wright, and he was our beloved hero. And I remember being at that last game as well, because when I miss moments, I remember forever that I wasn't there. So that's why I never miss a moment, because I missed the only playoff game I was not at in 2015 was the World Series win, because tickets were like $800, and I already had taken out a loan for that playoff to even go to those games. Like, that's how nuts I am, that I was pissed that I missed the right homer in their only World Series win, and I was the last one to leave the building in Game 5. And I remember I brought a box of Kleenex to David Wright's final game because I knew I was going to cry. But in the words of Kevin Hart, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready when they pulled him out, because I didn't know when it was happening. It happened randomly in the 5th inning. I'm like, wait, not yet. I want one more of that. Peter O'Brien, or whoever that first baseman was, to the
I remember that.
He should have dropped that foul pop-up, that loser. He didn't even have a career after that. That's what you get. That's karma for you.
The curse.
Or Mr. O'Brien. You probably own a bar in Ireland. Anyways, like, David Wright just was the true pro, and we had him on Amazing But True. And I just remember he's on the phone. I'm like, and we used my phone to connect to the board. So I'm like, David Wright is on my phone right now. David, hello, it's me.
Yeah, when you tell the story years later, you remember it as David Wright called you directly.
I'm like shaking. Like, Piazza, I bond with cheap toilet paper at the bodega because they ran out of the fancy ones. I just bond with David Wright because he's freaking David Wright. And, I took a video at Amazing Day that kind of blew up of David Wright, kind of hugging a kid who wasn't alive when he was alive, who wasn't alive when he was wasn't alive when – I don't know. I messed up the words. Anyway, it's too early in the morning. I haven't had my morning cup of Joe. He cried. And, that's the effect. Like, just him saying, hey, kid, come here. And the kid cried. And it was just, if you met David Wright and you had the chance to meet him, you were meeting a god. And that was a god going up to the rafters. And that rain that came down as he started speaking was tears coming from God. Because in that moment, Ariana Grande said, God is a woman on that day. David Wright said, God is a Mets fan.
Well, one can only hope. They went on to lose that game,
quote,
of course.
By the way. That's a Gandhi quote. That needs to go into the holy Bible.
We'll clip it for you. You can have it for your personal reel. The Mets go on to lose that game 5-2 in an unspectacular finish. They had a chance, right, in the 9th inning, and we almost saw the Soto moment that we've been waiting for. He crushes the ball down the line, would tie the game, just foul of the foul pole. Then the pitch clock goes off and he's not given a walk. Then he doesn't swing. He check swings. Umpire calls it a full swing, and he winds up striking out. So Soto gets beat up 3 times over in that one at bat. With David Wright looking on, you saw him like touch on his chest. Could you imagine if that would have happened? It would have been one of those iconic moments that gets to have that's one of those torch moments of, oh wow, Soto, who the face of the franchise for the next 15 years, just did something that David Wright would be proud of. You know what I mean? Right there in his own backyard. It wasn't meant to be. They go on to lose 5-2. Then, of course, we get yesterday's game. They finally find a way to pull one out, 3-2. David Peterson was outstanding. Yet again, the all-star. He's just taken his game to another level since the hip injury and coming back from the hip injury. So we saw some of the good with David Peterson. We saw Diaz, a little bit all over the place, but getting the job done at the end of the day. That's all. You look in the box score, you're like, oh my God, Diaz had a scoreless inning. Great job. That's that's where when it comes to Diaz, he's got to be better still. There's a little off and Stanek, as if it was Game 7, the way he celebrated that closing that game. If that's what it takes for Stanek to do that kind of stuff, let him celebrate that way every day.
Yeah, and I think that's what we love about Stanek is when he is good, this is why I say he needs Wild Thing when he goes out to the mound. Diaz has trumpets. Get Wild Thing. Get him a sleeveless jersey. Have the Mercury Mets jersey on him with pats on his face like he's Mike Tyson. He needs that moment because when he is good, he's electric. Now, he hasn't always been good. I mean, that day I said Saturday, Godwin's a Mets fan. Godwin's not a Juan Soto fan because how many times in one at-bat can you get screwed? I mean, the check swing, he did not swing, clearly. The timeout, the clock was at 1. How are you granting him a timeout in that?
Oh, the clock had hit 0 before the catcher stood up. The clock had hit 0. They have the side by side
up between 0 and 1, but it was way too late. That should have been ball 4. That was too disgrace, and that's been the season. I mean, has any team in the history of the sport been screwed more than the 2025 Mets when it comes to umpires? And I hope that adds fuel to the fire to them when
no doubt
they make the playoffs. Let's hope they don't fall out of it. But like this team keeps getting screwed, and they don't have room for error here. Like they do not have room for error. It would piss me off most from that game is Luis Trent. What are you doing throwing first base, bro? You're lollygagging it to first. There's no reason. He was already back at first. You weren't picking him off. That's
trying to be sneaky.
Alvarez move. Alvarez drills it. Terens went with a Jake Brown fastball to first base. He floated it in there. And, it went wild. And that was the difference in the game. I mean, run scores, then it's second and third? Like, no out. I mean, you were in that moment, you were like, all right, this is going to be an uphill battle. Lindor, I'm not going to hate on. He's in a slump. He's got to be better. And
struggling.
It shows you when they go as Lindor goes. The numbers. Mm-hmm. Every time he hits a homer, they win every time. So he's got to get it going. This middle relief Friday pissed me off. How in a one-run lead do you go to Alex Carrillo? He's got to stop trusting guys who got here a week ago. I haven't had my cup of coffee. These guys are in the middle of having their cup of coffee, and they shouldn't be out there in one-run games, Figgy. So, and I'm not saying Reed Garrett's the most reliable because clearly he's kind of let up here, but you have a fresh bullpen Friday, 4 days off. You have Raley.
And you went with Alex Carrillo, yeah.
That was my favorite part of Saturday, besides Wright, obviously, was Brooks Raley and that off-speed stuff. These guys can't hit it. Brooks Raley's got to be your guy now. Like, you got to pound him to the ground for the second half of the season. And stop using these 4A pitchers in big spots because you're going to lose games doing that. And Friday, I thought that was the difference.
Yeah, no doubt. We can do a whole hour on the Mets weekend series, but we
did it for 4 years.
I know it. So unfortunately, we've run out of time for the Mets discussion. They welcome the Angels into Queens. 7-10 game. Of course, now you have moving forward, the trade deadline is coming up. We'll talk about that probably on tomorrow's show. I want to definitely get your thoughts on that. One other thing, Francisco Alvarez, rumored to be coming up, helped the team. He's hit 11 home runs since his demotion down to AAA. 11 in 18 games. So he's found the power stroke back. Hopefully he can keep that going and really help them boost this Mets lineup, especially the bottom half of it. We'll talk about that and a lot more. Touch on the Yankees coming up after a break. Welcome back to Figgie and the Moose. If you haven't noticed, the man with the luscious locks next to me is not Marc Malusis, but the the debonair Jake Brown at Jake Brown Live, the host of the Mets Daily podcast on YouTube. My former co-host of the Amazing But True podcast, filling in for Marc Malusis, who's on vacation this week. And listen, we touched on the Mets, the Yankees this weekend. Go down into hot Atlanta, have a series. I wouldn't say a series to remember, but they were able to pull it out, winning 2 of 3. And at the same time, we saw kind of a difference in styles of play, right? The Atlanta Braves, a lot of heart, a lot of hustle, grittiness to them. Even though they're not winning, their superstars are still playing like superstars. Matt Olson hitting bombs. Ronald Acuna Jr., if you haven't watched him ever before, if you haven't, just take a look at Friday's game. Just do me a favor and look at Friday's game. Look at Saturday's game. Just watch what this man is capable of doing every single time up. Oh, Ozzy Albies, remember that guy? He only signed for $40 million for a 7-year contract. He only had 9 RBIs in the first 2 games. I mean, you're talking about a Braves team that it was exciting to watch, ran the bases well, played defense well. That throw by Acuna, it's right out of Roberto Clemente. Right out of Roberto Clemente, the way he caught it. He almost did 2 plays at once. It looked like Willie Mays over-the-shoulder basket catch, and then the Roberto Clemente throw all the way from the right field corner to third base to get Vivas. One of those plays iconic that will remain on highlight reels for all time because it was that good. Then, of course, you talk about the baseball, and there's a little bit of a possible another cheating scandal by the Yankees with, giving signs or location at second base with Jazz Chisholm. That's the part I really want to get into. Yankees, again, win 2 out of 3, so they win the series, which is good for the Mets, pushes the Braves back down. Yankees, of course, are in they're 3 games behind, 3.5 games behind right now. Toronto heading into Toronto. So that series is coming up. That's a huge series for the Yankees. And what we've seen so far from the Yankees kind of all year long for me has been just there's more. There's a lacklusterness to them. There's a laziness to their style of play where they just think it's going to happen and they think Judge is going to save the day every single time. And, at least we saw Volpe wake up a little bit for whatever reasons, if he was getting signs or not. We saw Volpe wake up, hitting a couple home runs. We saw him, the deep fly ball, almost a grand slam in that situation as well to drive in an RBI. So we saw Volpe wake up a little bit. Of course, Judge is Judge, even though he struggled, he still had the 1 home run. And overall, I think, the Yankees are looking forward to punching their way back to the top of the division. So let me get your thoughts on what you saw this weekend.
Yeah, well, they could punch their way out of the division getting swept here by the Blue Jays. This is a massive series, especially going into the trade deadline, just 10 days away. If they get swept, they're 6, 7 out of the division, and, they're probably going to get a wild card spot. And by the way, that wild card is really clogging up this trade deadline because teams that are under 500 in the American League think that they're in it, a la Minnesota Twins, who I think, I'll guarantee on here, the Mets are doing a deal with the Minnesota Twins. I don't know what day it's going to happen. It's happening in the next 10 days because they have so many pitchers. But, the laziness was encapsulated. You want to use the SAT word? Shout out to my mom, SAT tutor. She's like, it was 4 syllables. Very good. Third base has been putrid for the Yankees. And what's the opposite in Spanish of Viva Las Vegas? Long live, Vivas. How about die?
Mátalo.
Mátalo Vivas. Like, how does he not slide in a third? He stops running. Like, yes, I'm not taking away from Acuna. It's an incredible throw. It's an incredible out. But anyone with the right mind should have been safe on that play. If he slid, he's safe. And if he runs fully, he's safe. But he pulled up like he was getting to the base. He's like, oh, I'm good. Is the coach there? Is there a third base? Oh, it's Luis.
Yeah.
I can tell you a few things about him as Mets manager. He was not good. And he wasn't a good third base coach that day because he's got to tell his guy, get down. Like, doesn't he see a ball coming like a Cuban missile? Like, you got to get down there. So I thought that really showed you how lazy this team is, how you not slide in that situation to be safe. And he ended up being out. So it was a great play. But, yeah, this is a massive series. And this is a team that, Jazz Chisholm is a bit of a big crybaby. And I get people like I think he's fun. He's a good player. But I do think his emotions get the best of him sometimes, and he carries it into at-bats when he doesn't get a call, he gets tossed. And I think there's something good about fire desire, but you can talk all the smack you want. Your team is playing piss poor. You're not hitting that good. You've been fine, but not
Yeah,
incredible. And I just think the attitude thing, it's a bit of a problem to me. I get the fire and desire, but sometimes he cries a little bit too much for my liking. And if you're in first place and you're running the division, great, but you're not right now. And I think that's a team that badly needs reinforcement. And listen, if they don't get Suarez, I think is a massive miss. Now you might get Ryan McMahon, who's a
huge.
good player, but Suarez they have got to be all in on. And who knows with the D-backs at 500 if they're even going to sell him. But that's got to be the
Yeah.
Yankees guy. You hang on
Suarez had 3 home runs in his first 2 games back from the All-Star break. So swinging a hot bat, even though he got hit in the hand during that game, was the White Sox pitcher that hit him. That should have banned the White Sox players from the rest of the All-Star game. So a good time to kind of go all in on Suarez, who would love to play for a team that has championship aspirations. We just at the World Series. Jazz Chisholm, I'm going to go back to it because as a former player and a pitcher who knows when guys are kind of giving signs or tipping, you can tell by the takes, right? You got a team who earlier in the game, they're swinging and missing at those sliders in the dirt. They're late on fastballs up and in. All of a sudden, there's at-bats in that inning where they're not even offering at my slider in the dirt. They're not even offering at the elevated fastball just outside the zone by 1 or 2 inches. Something's a little different here. And, teams are starting to notice it more and more that the Yankees have done this for a long, long time. And again, it's not cheating. It's not cheating, but it's the way that you do it. We saw it against the Seattle Mariners with the jumping down, emphatic hand movements and all that. That's just too much. That's not what baseball's supposed to be done. There's subtle ways to do the same thing. But, of course, they're in the middle of a rally. They're going to try and do everything they can. And it worked against Seattle. It wound up working for them to come back and win that game. It was an uphill climb. They were able to do it. But Eddie Perez, who the catcher, former great Maddox's, personal catcher, he was letting Jazz Chisholm know. He pointed to his ribs where there's ways to handle it, where we can hit you next time you come up to bat for doing the things that your antics at second base. And then he claimed to say that he was telling him to be smart. Whether he was or wasn't, it's one of those unwritten things in baseball that gets said, and it's more of a warning. I don't think anybody's going to go out there and actually throw at his head. They may throw it behind him. They may hit him. I mean, that's how baseball polices itself. But now, because of all the attention that was drawn to it, all the cameras out of there, all the HD in baseball, it becomes a big thing. And Jazz Chisholm is kind of always in the middle of something of that nature. He's always in the middle of being – he's just too much, right? There's just too much for a guy who's, below 250 career hitter and has some pop. 3 home runs in the home run derby. I think you had a better shot at hitting home runs. And for all that's said and purposes, the Yankees kind of need more guys that fit in than stand out if they're not going to, stand out in the right way. Like Judge stands out in the right way. Grisham stands out in the right way. These aren't just, guys that want to float by, but, he comes in wearing his hat backwards. You're not Ken Griffey Jr. He comes in wearing a green belt and green spikes. I remember the days that the Yankees all wear the same company. Adidas was their sponsor, and it was all navy blue, and everything was navy blue. The pinstripes were worn a certain way. This guy comes in, shirt untucked, hat backwards, and doing what he wants to do, and nobody's there to stop him. The big chains, there used to be only one chain. How many chains is he wearing? His hat backwards, the facial policy all gets changed. The Yankees are not the same Yankees that they used to be, so I'm not the old man screaming at a cloud, but at the same time, you got to have guys that don't bring attention to themselves and focus on the team concept more so than anything, right? He hit 4 rockets that could have been hits and game-changing hits, and he has nothing to show for it. That's the karma we talked about just a little while ago, right? It's a karma of the game telling you, hey, dude, slow it down, right? You'd love for him to, do things the right way and get a bloop base hit with the bases loaded. He would take that more so, but baseball gods are like, oh my God, he smoked a line drive right at the third baseman. You were this close. Dial it down a little bit. That's always been my knock on Jazz Chisholm.
Yeah, and I'm not the get off my lawn guy, although someone told me recently, Jake, you are a mix of a funny old Italian guy with like a Gen Z, because I'm young and hip, but I'm also can be a complaining old man. And I don't mean to complain about him. I do think there's a place for fun and everything. But when you're as inconsistent as you are and like cursing out guys and start, getting ejected left and right, it's just a little bit too much. And the Yankees got to get their act together here, because the American League might be wide open, but if you watch a lot of Yankee baseball, like Yankee fans do, you couldn't utter the word World Series for this team. You would look like a fool. So the Tigers look like a much more ready World Series team than the New York Yankees do right now. And it sounds crazy saying that, but the Tigers look legit, and they have that front line starting out. They need Fried to stay healthy, and this is what you're going to find out. Like, this is an 8-year contract. And I think in the long run, it's going to be a terrible deal. In the short run, you need it to work. And that's your guy. With Cole Khan, you have to go get a starting pitcher. Stroman's not going to be as good as he's been the last few starts all year, and you got to go get a third baseman. So Brian Cashman, you got your hands full. David Stearns, he has his hands full. Both these New York GMs got to be aggressive because the American League is wide open. And believe it or not, the National League is fairly open. Now, I think the Cubs are good. Dodgers, obviously, are Dodgers. But both leagues are open for the taking, and these windows don't happen every year. This is a year where the parity in the sport is through the roof. Everyone's alive, and that's what's hurting the trade deadline. So, Cashman better start ringing those phones. You need a third baseman. You probably need a starter and a reliever.
No, it's a big list for getting this time of the year when you are looking for your reinforcements and they are not from within. So, in wrapping up, the Yankees have 3 in Toronto. They're down 3 right now in the standings, so a good time to either get back in it, or if they get swept, they fall back to 6 games. You'll really be able to take Panic City would move all the way to the Bronx. It used to be in Flushing. We don't hear that too many times anymore. I think that the culture has changed around the New York Mets with the New York Yankees. Finding their identity always starts at the head with Aaron Boone. And Aaron Boone is very much a lot of cliche, and pretending that he didn't know that Munoz was giving, pitches away. And, that was a thing? I didn't even know. He's always done that kind of thing. He's always talking, in big cliches about everything's right in front of us. It's all for the
I was going to
taking.
say, that's the one cliche for both teams that is true right now. Everything's right in front of them. The Yankees could take first place by the end of the week, and the Mets could take first place tonight if they get help from the Red Sox, and you beat the Angels, who you're better than.
Yeah, the Mets are constantly going up and down, up and down, up and down. I think that's the heartbeat thing. We'll look at that tracking of the rest of the year, and that's the heartbeat thing. Let's see if they can get into a good run. We're seeing 10-game win streaks all over baseball, which is crazy to me. So can the Mets get on that type of run? They got their starting pitchers, that are healthy coming back. We're excited to see these guys in the second half. We're also excited. The Yankees in Toronto. This is, I think, a tell-all series for where they are at this time of the year. So that'll wrap up this episode of Figgie and the Moose. Again, thank you so much to Jake Brown at Jake Brown Live, Mets Daily Podcast on YouTube. Catch him there. He will be my co-host tomorrow, so tune in. We got a lot more thoughts. Jake is a man full of thoughts, okay? That's why we went a little bit over today. We'll try and keep it a little more tidy, a little more wrapped up, a little more concise for tomorrow. But great talking to you again, my brother. Thank you so much for helping out.
We always go over. We never go under here with Figgie.
Always play the over. Always play the over when it comes to Figgie and Jake. I'll tell you that right now. But thanks again, my man. And this has been another episode of Figgie and the Moose on Pix Plus. Also, catch us on YouTube as well. And thank you for tuning in. Sports Nation Nightly comes at you at 7 o'clock tonight. Kate Rooney will be your host. And I'm Nelson Figueroa. Catch you tomorrow.